What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am going to be getting into my 2026 college football season predictions. I have gotten all the records all laid out. I've predicted the entire season of every conference, where these teams are going to be ranked. In this video, I will be looking at every conference. We will be crowning the champion of every conference. We'll be building the college football playoff, and we will be predicting the college football playoff. It's going to be a fun one. I am really excited for this one. It took me a while to predict all of these games, but thanks to our trusty website here, Playoff Predictors, we were able to do it. But guys, let's get into my analysis. We are going to be starting out with the Atlantic Coast Conference, the ACC Conference. And I'm not going to go into depth on every team, but I wanted to pick out a few teams here and there. Starting out, number one, I have Miami finishing 10-2. If we look at their schedule, I think Miami has a good year. They have a favorable schedule, honestly. No really tough games this year. Their best win came to 9-3 Pittsburgh. So not really a big, resume season for Miami, especially when they lost to Clemson. I have the Tigers pulling off the upset and losing to Notre Dame on the road. Those are two tough games on the road. Their toughest games of the season. But Miami should be a good team. I think they're going to be in the ACC championship game, and they will be playing Louisville. Louisville, I honestly have some high expectations for. I actually think Louisville will be a good team. They have a favorable schedule. Their toughest game is in week 1 to Ole Miss. That should be a really fun game. I could actually see Louisville winning that one. I do have Ole Miss winning it. Tough week 3 game against SMU. That'll be a big game for the season. If SMU wins that game, SMU's going to the ACC championship. So unfortunately for them, Louisville does get the win. But other than that, yeah, I really like Louisville's season. Their only other loss came to Pittsburgh, who I have some high expectations for. I have Pittsburgh going 9-3 this season. They had a bad loss to Boston College, but I really like Pittsburgh this year. Other teams, I think SMU is better than what this 8-4 record. I kind of have some tough losses in there for SMU. I have a loss to Louisville, but then they go 6-1, then kind of finishing off the year on a rough note. I have a trap game loss to Syracuse here with Virginia Tech, who should be a good team this season. Then coming off the win against against Virginia Tech, I actually have Wake Forest beating SMU. I think this Wake Forest team could be an underrated team this season. And Notre Dame, I have beating SMU. But other than that, not much else. I do think, let's skim over Clemson here. Clemson, I think, is a team that gets overhyped every season. I think they have the talent to beat a team like Miami, which is their best win, but also lose some games like to California, Florida State, some of these losses that I think will happen. And then, honestly, finishing off the year rough with losses to Duke and South Carolina. But yeah, that is going to be the ACC records there. Going to the Big 12. Sorry, this website can be slow, especially when you have a million games you predicted. Big 12, I actually have the BYU Cougars sitting on top of the Big 12 with an undefeated record. BYU, I think, is going to have a big year. This team has missed the playoffs the past couple years barely. They were on the fringe. Both of those years kind of got snubbed. I think this BYU team's going to have a chip on their shoulder this year and actually have a big year with their biggest win coming to a Notre Dame team in week 7. Notre Dame is a physical team. This should be a really good game, but I have BYU pulling off the upset and then riding through the rest of their schedule. Texas Tech, I have going 11-1. Texas Tech, I think, is an interesting team. We saw what they were last year. That defense is really freaking good. Lost a few pieces, but should be good. The big concern is the quarterback situation and kind of the off-season stuff that happened there. But Texas Tech should be a freaking good team this season. I have them going 11-1, and that'll be the rematch in the Big 10 or Big 12 championship. Houston, I think, is an underrated team in the Big 12. Right now, they're ranked in the college football preseason rankings of the coaches poll. Houston Tough loss to Texas Tech and to Kansas State, but I have them beating Utah, who in week 8 I had Utah staying undefeated, so that's a big resume boosting win for Houston. Not much else, though, to their resume. Then we have teams like Kansas State, Arizona, and Utah all finishing 9-3. I think those are going to be really solid competitive teams in the Big 12. And TCU, I actually have beating Texas Tech to finish off the year. That'll be a resume boosting win to get them into the top 25. TCU is always a fringy Big 12 team, really high floor team that I think will finish with a good 8-4 record. And then the rest of the Big 12, you can see the records there. Then we move on to the Big 10. Let's go on to the Big 10 here. The Big 10, I have Ohio State and Oregon as the top 2 seeds in the Big 10. Ohio State has a really brutal schedule this season. We know Ohio State, they have the elite weapons. They have the elite defense. This team will be top of the top this year, obviously. But they have a really tough schedule. You know, starting out with the game against Texas, I have them losing that one. That'll be a really good game. I just think I trust the Texas team just a little bit more at home in that one. Really tough games. Illinois should be a good team. I have them winning, though. Iowa, good team. Then they get a huge win against Indiana in Week 7. I have Indiana undefeated at that point on in the season. Week 9, a USC win. Oregon at home is the biggest game of the year for both those teams. I have Ohio State sneaking away with the win, and that'll be Oregon's only loss. I do have Ohio State getting upset by Nebraska. Nebraska is a tough place to play, and I think Ohio State loses it, but they do get the win against their rival, Michigan. Oregon is an interesting team. I have them number 2. Their schedule's way less brutal, honestly, than Ohio State's. Much more manageable. Their toughest game is against Ohio State, and I would say the Washington game. I think Washington's going to be a pretty good team this year. But other than that, it's really respectable. And I think Oregon, this really, really good defensive line for Oregon is going to be a force to be reckoned with, which only gets them a loss this season. Washington, I think, will be a good team this year as you take a look at their record. Other teams that I want to mention, Iowa going 8-4. I think they'll be a competitive team as always. Illinois 9-3. Good team. I think they should probably finish in the top 25 this year. Indiana is a team that I actually have them missing at 9-3. I think they'll probably miss the playoffs. We'll have to build our bracket here. But I think they start out hot. No really tough games besides the Nebraska one in week 6. But I actually have them finishing off the year a little bit rough. It is a manageable schedule for Indiana, but this team, I think, is going to be the team to beat, and I think they drop some games because of that. One game to USC. I think USC at that point on in the year will be a hungry team for a win, and USC pulls off the upset on the road. And then a Washington team who I'm high on, I think Indiana loses in Week 12. Then other teams to think about. USC has a lot of high expectations this season. I just don't trust Lincoln Riley in these really big games to start out the year. I think they start out 4-0, but Oregon's going to be really tough, even though it's at home. I think they actually lose the game to Washington at home. I have them losing to Penn State. Penn State, if that game was being played in USA, I would pick USC, but in Penn State, I think they take the L. And Ohio State, I think they lose that one, unfortunately. So USC is a team that's getting some high hopes. My take is USC is going to finish out the year 8-4 and miss the playoffs, and Lincoln Riley's job will probably be done after that. Penn State actually has a really easy schedule, but I really just think in the first year of this new regime in Penn State, I think they're going to have some woes and drop some games against some mid teams like Northwestern and Maryland. I just don't really trust this Penn State team that much, as a lot of people do. Nebraska is a team that 8-4 has a really strong resume, really tough schedule for Nebraska, but I have them beating Washington. At that point in Week 9, I had Washington undefeated. Nebraska's a really tough place to play, and I think they get some upsets against Washington and Ohio State, which really boosts their resume. but losses to Illinois and Iowa, that'll keep them out of the playoffs. But yeah, that's going to be the Big Ten there. Pac-12, I'm not going to really go in depth on any of these teams, but Pac-12, we have Boise State at 10-1 and San Diego State at 7-4. They will be the matchup there. Texas and in the SEC, the last conference will really go in depth here. Texas is 11-1. This Texas team has a brutal schedule like Ohio State, but I really, really like Texas this season. I think they will be one of the best teams in the in college football. With Manning, I think he will take some steps this year. We know how good of a prospect he was. He finished off the year better. I think this Texas team has a really freaking good year. Ohio State, week 2, that's the big game. Can they kind of start out the year strong on a high note? I think they do. Tennessee is a really tough week 4 game. That'll be a tough one. I think Tennessee could really pull off the upset there. So there could be, I could honestly see a 2-2 start from Texas to start the year. Those are 2 tough games to start of the season. Oklahoma on a neutral site. We know the rivalry is big. I do have Texas winning that one, though. And then Florida. I think actually Texas gets upset by Florida in week 7. Florida, I think, is an underrated team. I think Florida, I don't think this team is like top, contender level, like a playoff team, but I think Florida has talent to pull off an upset, and I think that's going to be their biggest upset on the road to Texas, who is coming off a tough win against Oklahoma, Tennessee, Ohio State. Florida or Texas, I think, is due for a loss there. Then we get some tough games. Ole Miss, Texas, I think, bounces back. Mississippi State will be an easy win. Missouri is a tough game, but Texas wins it. LSU wins it. Texas A&M is probably one of their toughest games. There's like 6 really tough games in this season for Texas. But I think this Texas team is just that good that they only come up with a loss out of all that. I think that's their ceiling. I don't see with that schedule going undefeated, but we shall see. Ole Miss, I do have 10-2. I know they just lost their coach, but I do think this Ole Miss team has a favorable schedule for an SEC team. Their biggest win comes to Georgia in week 10. That'll really boost their resume. But the games that really are tough is against LSU. I think they sneak away with a win against LSU, get kind of a revenge game. The game against Texas is tough, that I have them losing, and Oklahoma will be a really tough game. But if they can split those 4 games, as I have them do, this team will be a playoff team. Then we go to Georgia. Georgia, I think, starts out the year really hot at 9-0, but then kind of falls off at the end. I have them losing to Ole Miss and to South Carolina. South Carolina, I think, is a very similar team to Florida, where I don't know if they're physical enough to really be a playoff team, but I think they have enough talent to be a team that can pull off an upset against some of these top dog teams, which is Georgia here. But Georgia's biggest win, clearly week 4 against Oklahoma, was huge. And then the win against Bama rivalry game, I think Georgia gets the job done. Oklahoma, I think, will be a really good team this year. I think Oklahoma is a sleeper team. This team brought back the most players from the portal, or kept the most starters, so kind of avoided the transfer portal there. So that's huge for Oklahoma. This team is underrated. They were a playoff team last year, and they have all these starters coming back, improving this roster. I just think the Georgia and Texas game are going to be a little bit too much, but then I have them winning out to finish off the season. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, those are 2 tough games, but they're being played at home. I think Oklahoma has a really solid season at 10-2. Alabama at 9-3. Alabama, I think, has another 3-loss year. I think Alabama gets upset, hot take, by Mississippi State. That'll be just one of those games where Alabama, just these bad vibes, goes against them, and Mississippi State pulls off a big upset at home. That'll be a game to be talked about for the year if that happens, obviously. But really tough schedule here. Georgia, I think they lose. Then they have Tennessee and Texas A&M. They could drop both those games, I do have them winning. Then LSU. Then they have a really much easier schedule to finish off the year. But that Mississippi State loss, honestly, will be holding Alabama back. And then teams like Tennessee. I think Tennessee can be a competitive team. I wanted to highlight Texas A&M. I had Texas A&M starting out the year 7-0. This team, I think, will be pretty darn good to start out the year, but I have them kind of fallen off, losing to Alabama, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and Texas. I think they kind of finish off the year with a rough loss, especially the 12th man, not enough to beat Tennessee. That would be a bad loss. And then Texas is just not enough. So Texas A&M, I think, kind of has a late season collapse in the first year of this new regime for LSU. You know, a lot of hype up for LSU. I just have some vibe that this team is going to drop a couple games to start of the year against two tough teams and then kind of try and recover. Beating Alabama was big, but against Texas and Tennessee, I have some losses there. So to finish off the year, I think this LSU team's getting a little bit too much hyped, and I think we need to pump the brakes just a little bit on them. And then, just the Florida. Their really big win was to Texas, but some really tough losses in there as well. So that's going to be the SEC. Let's go to the other conferences here. Just skim over these. The AAC Conference, American Athletic, I have UTSA and Navy at the top. I expect a really good year from UTSA. Tulane's a team that, with their lost coach, I think could have a little bit of a step back, but I think this team does finish off the year pretty strong at 8-4. And then those other teams, if you want to take a look at the bottom there. In the Conference USA, I have Jacksonville State and Western Kentucky finishing at the top, with Liberty losing the tiebreakers. In the MAC, Toledo, I think, has a good year at 10-2. They will play Western Michigan for the Mid-American Conference. The Mountain West, this will load. I actually really like UNLV this season. I only have them losing once to Hawaii, and they will be playing another good team in New Mexico. I also think North Dakota State in their first year in the the FBS, I think, has a good solid year actually for them, and finishing 8-4. This team was dominating the FCS for so long. And then the Sun Belt, I got Louisiana finishing at the top. Expect a good year from the Ragin' Canes. And then James Madison. James Madison, a team that made the playoffs last year. I think they have another solid year at 10-2. All right. So that was a little bit of time there that we talked about some of these teams. Let's get into now what you guys have been waiting for, the predictions. I'm going to start out with with some of these games here. Let's start out with the mid-major conferences here. Let's start out with the Pac-12. Boise State against San Diego State. I got San Diego State at 7-4 and Boise State at 10-1. Boise State is a great program. I'm excited to see them in the Pac-12, but also San Diego State is. The thing about this game is these two teams are meeting up in the previous week. So Boise State gets the win in the last game. I don't think this Boise State team actually beats San Diego State twice in a row. I think San Diego State's a well-coached team that makes adjustments and pulls off in the upset in the Pac-12 champion. So San Diego State in this new Pac-12 era is going to be the first Pac-12 champion. Navy versus UTSA, I got this should be a good game. I like both these teams. I kind of like Navy just slightly a little bit more than UTSA. UTSA, I think, has a big season, but just not enough to beat UTSA in my opinion. Then we go to Jacksonville State against Western Kentucky. In the Conference USA, I think it's the worst conference in FBS, but I kind of like this Jacksonville State team just a little bit more. Fire logo from this team. They get the win against Western Kentucky. Mid-American Conference, Toledo versus Western Michigan should be a really good game. Toledo at this point, I think, is 10-2. So a really good year for Toledo, and I think they continue it winning the MAC. In the Mountain West, UNLV against New Mexico. I got UNLV going 12-1 on the season. This will be an excellent year for UNLV. They beat a top 25 team this season. They also beat California in my predictions. UNLV, I think, is a sleeper Mountain West team this year. I think they get the job done against New Mexico, if it'll let me pick that. I picked it. This website can be slow sometimes. Sorry, guys. But let's go to Sun Belt Conference, the Fun Belt Conference. James Madison against Louisiana. This year, I think we have a different champion. I'm going to go with Louisiana. I think this will be a really fun matchup in the Sun Belt, but Louisiana pulls off the win. They get the championship. So, those are going to be my mid-major champions. Let's get to the important stuff. I don't know why it's not letting me pick UNLV. There you go. All right. So we got Miami versus Louisville. This will be a really great game. Right now, Miami and Louisville are both 10-2, so the winner will be a lock for the playoffs. The loser will probably not make it at that point. I am going to have to go with Miami here. I really do like Louisville this season. That's why I have them going 10-2. I think they will be the best team, or one of the better teams in the ACC, the second best. But Miami bringing in a new quarterback. This defense was really good last year. I expect this defense to be good again this season. I think this Miami team is just the clear best team in the ACC, and they get the win. BYU against Texas Tech. We saw what happened when these two teams played last season. It was rough. Texas Tech won. I actually think BYU actually comes up with the win this time around. BYU, like I said, I think this team is going to be a lot better than a lot of people think. This team brought back Kalani Sitake, has basically everyone's back with Bear Bachmeier coming in to, he's going to take some steps as the quarterback for the Cougars. I think this offense plays a lot better than they did last year against Texas Tech's defense, and Texas Tech has some question marks on the offense right now. So BYU this season, in my opinion, they are going to go undefeated. They're my only undefeated team, which is a surprise. With that schedule, I think BYU has a chip on their shoulder, and now they will not be snubbed from the playoffs. In the Big Ten, the Oregon Ducks against Ohio State. The funny thing is these two teams played this year down at Ohio State. Unfortunately, though, Oregon lost that one. I don't think they lose twice to Ohio State. I think Oregon is the better team this season. That defense is absurd for Oregon, and I think they win at least one against Ohio State, but that's an excellent matchup for sure. Then we go to Texas against Ole Miss in the SEC, and this is a good game. I think Ole Miss is an underrated team this season. I know they lost their coach, but I think they're going to have a chip on their shoulder because of that. I do think Texas, though, wins this one, and I think they win it pretty favorably. I think Ole Miss won't be as good as last season, even though they have a really solid 10-2 record. Their schedule's a little bit easier, but I think this is going to be a more close to a blowout, probably like a 14, 2-3 score win because of how good this Texas team is. And because of the tiebreakers, I think it would have been a much better SEC championship if we got to see Oklahoma or Georgia, probably a lot closer, but Ole Miss gets there. So now we got to build our college football playoff bracket. So congrats to all these teams who were able to win their championships. Sorry, had a little bit of a brain fart there, but we're able to win their conference championships. But let's go to build our bracket now. As we see the suggested field, we are not going to follow that at all. Let's go with Toledo, Jacksonville State in the field. Yeah, sorry, we are not doing that. So let's build our field right now. Number 1 seed, I got the Texas Longhorns. And I know the Texas Longhorns, compared to a team like BYU, BYU's undefeated and Texas is not. I just think Texas, you look at their resume, man, my oh my, it's insane. Beating Ole Miss, beating Ole Miss twice, actually, in the SEC championship as well. Beating Oklahoma, Ohio State, Missouri. You can just go on and on and on from Texas there. Just a really tough schedule. But I think they have enough to get through 1 seed, even with the Florida loss, which Florida isn't a bad team. They were 7-5, ranked for a lot of the part of the season. Just kind of fell off at the end, but I think that Texas should be the 1 seed. But the 2 seed will be BYU. BYU this year, even though they're in the Big 12, I mean, they had an incredible season, beating Notre Dame, who is expected to be a really good team here, beating Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship, beating a lot of ranked potential teams, good teams, TCU, Arizona, Utah, their rivals. So BYU should be, if they finish this record with this kind of resume, they should be respected as the 2, which will probably surprise a lot of you guys in the comments that BYU will finish this good. But 3, I am going to have to go with Oregon, the Big Ten champs in this. That'll seal their fate as the 3 seed. This Oregon Duck team winning the Big Ten. It's the clear-cut 3 at this point. Then the number 4 is going to be our first team that didn't win their championship. It's going to be our second SEC team, and that's going to be Oklahoma. I got Oklahoma finishing off here as the 4. You know, Oklahoma's resume is really freaking good. We look at it, they beat Michigan, who was ranked at that time. They beat them. They beat Ole Miss, who's a really good team. Texas A&M, really solid team, especially at the time they beat them. And their only 2 losses were to number 1 Texas right now and Georgia, who Georgia only has 2 losses. So Oklahoma has a really good resume. That's why I think they beat out the number 5, who I think is going to be Ohio State. It was close between Oklahoma and Ohio State in these rankings, but I have Oklahoma just a little bit above Ohio State because I had Ohio State losing to a ranked Nebraska team, who Nebraska's ranked, but it's not nearly as good as the Oklahoma losses, and Ohio State has 1 more loss. I know Ohio State has the better wins. They beat Indiana, who at the time they beat them was undefeated, and they beat Oregon, who was undefeated, their only loss. But other than that, I think Oklahoma has the slightly better resume over Ohio State. All right. Then we have a little bit of not a gap, but I think the number 6 team's Notre Dame. They only have 1 loss on the year. The only problem with Notre Dame is they have just 1 really big win, and that is the Miami win. Other than that, they don't have really anything else. They don't have any other ranked wins. Their only loss is to this number 2 BYU team. But because of the fact they don't have any other ranked wins, I think teams like Ohio State, who you shouldn't punish them too much for losing in the Big Ten championship barely to Oregon, and Oklahoma, who has monster wins in there. So Notre Dame, though, you got to respect their 1 loss, especially if it came to this BYU team who's undefeated right now. Then we go to the 7 seed. I have Ole Miss, who I have them losing in the Big Ten championship. Like I said, I think Ole Miss actually has a favorable schedule, but you got to respect some of the wins they have here. Beating LSU at home is huge. Beating Missouri was a big win. Beating Georgia, who at that point in the season, I think it was week 9, so Georgia was 8-0. They beat them. So Ole Miss had a good season. They go as the 7 seed. The 8 seed I have actually being Georgia. Georgia monster year at 10-2. This team is a contender, as we know. It was tight for me between them and the 9. I will give the 9. They weren't going to be able to beat out Ole Miss, though, because Ole Miss obviously beat them. The 9 seed was Miami. Miami obviously wins the ACC, so that's a big resume booster. But other than that, that's Miami's biggest win. Like, they beat a ranked Pittsburgh team, but Pittsburgh's not like the best ranked win ever, and they beat Louisville in the championship, which is huge. I just don't know if it beats out Oregon or Georgia, who beat Oklahoma, beat Alabama, beat Florida, beat Missouri, and their only losses are to Ole Miss and South Carolina, who South Carolina is not like the worst team in the world. So it's close. You could flip-flop these with the Miami ACC championship. I could see Miami being the 9 or even maybe the 7, but I'm going to put Miami at the 9 just because I think the ACC schedule is just way easier than the SEC. And then the 10 seed, I'm going to go Texas Tech. Texas Tech I have losing 2 straight heading into this, but being 11-0 at that point was probably a lock for them to make the postseason. But Texas Tech, I think, barely sneaks in. I think, they beat Houston, who at this point was a really good team. They beat Arizona, who was a really solid team. Their schedule's not great, but TCU they lost to. That's the thing that's putting them back, especially with Miami, Georgia, is TCU's just was not really considered that good, and they lost to them at home. But Texas Tech, with 2 losses and one of their losses coming in the Big Ten championship, I don't see really any teams below them having much of a stronger case than that. And then the last team getting in is going to be Washington. Last team of these Power 4 conferences. Washington's going to be a 3-loss team for me, barely getting in. And Washington's case is interesting because Washington has some really solid wins this season. They beat Indiana. They beat USC, who is expected to be a really good team. And they really don't have bad losses. They did lose to Penn State and to Oregon. And Nebraska, who are all solid teams. So I think Washington will be a really solid team, but it's really tight between a lot of other teams heading into the bracket. And then the UNLV Rebels will be the 12 seed winning the division. So that's going to be our bracket right now. I wanted to just look at my top 25. The teams that I have missing out is Houston. Houston barely missing out. I just think Houston's resume doesn't compete with Washington's. They did beat Utah, but other than that, they have no ranked wins. No teams in the top 25 that they beat. They lost to Texas Tech and Kansas State. So just not enough for me. I forgot to let me put in USC was the last team there. So let me just write that in. But Houston very close to making the playoffs over Washington. I just have Washington a little bit over. Nebraska, even with 4 losses, their 4 losses aren't bad to all top 25 teams. And they beat 2 teams that are number 3 and 5 right now. So they deserve to be up there. But with 4 losses, not enough to make the playoffs. Louisville, not enough with 3 losses. And then we have Alabama with a bad loss, missing it. Indiana, not really any big wins there. And they lost to this Washington team. So that's going to be my top 25 ending the year right there. All right, let's move this over. Now let's get into my top 25 predictions. If you got, or my, not my top 25, my playoff predictions. If you guys are still here, you guys are a trooper for sure. Let's get into this here. I am excited to predict the college football playoff. All right, so let's get to the first matchup, which is going to be Georgia versus Miami. This will be a really freaking good game. Georgia, this team is always a contender. We know how good this Georgia defense is year in and year out. They're playing Miami, who Miami has a really freaking good defense. These are two historic programs. But Miami this year that they didn't have last year, I think they're going to have much better quarterback play, which really cost them games. It cost them the championship game on that bad interception from Carson Beck. This Miami team didn't lose a lot of pieces either. I think Miami, I know that they didn't really have the best schedule, a lot of good opponents, but I think that Miami wins this game and moves on. Georgia, I think, is a really high floor team. I just don't think against some of these top contenders that Georgia has enough, though. Then we go to Ohio State versus UNLV. It's fun to see UNLV in the playoffs, but against Ohio State, just not going to be enough in that one. All right, Notre Dame against Washington, a fun game. Physical Notre Dame team against this fun Washington offense with one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. I just think that Notre Dame's going to dominate the line of scrimmage in this one, and Washington just won't have enough answers. I got Notre Dame moving on. Ole Miss against Texas Tech. Red Rebels against the Red Raiders. Should be a fun game. I actually have an upset here. I'm going to go with the Red Raiders of Texas Tech. I think they lose the game to TCU and the Big 12 championship. Ole Miss, I think, might be just a little bit of a fraudulent 7 seed here. That's why I have Texas Tech with that excellent defense in this team. I think they'll figure out the offensive questions at this point on in this season, and they pull off the win. So my first, I guess Miami you can consider the upset, but let's go up here. Texas versus Miami. 1 versus 9. This should be a fun game this year. I really like Miami. Don't get me wrong. This team's really good. I got to go with Texas, though. This Texas team, I think this season is going to have a lot of tough games, but I think they're just going to be able to prevail, and I think they prevail again against Miami. It should be a fun matchup, though. But then we go to Oklahoma against Ohio State. This should be another really freaking good game. Like I said, I really like the Sooners as a team. But honestly, the 5 seed just kind of feels like it always has a massive advantage in the college football playoff. Being able to play at home against a mid-major team like UNLV, who's a good team, but not nearly as good as some of these other teams that they have to play. And Oklahoma, I know they're coming off the bye, but the bye week sometimes with these college football teams can throw them off. We've seen it. Only one team that had the bye has won in the college football 12-team playoff era. So it obviously having some effect on some of these teams. Although I think Oklahoma's a really good team, Ohio State's just too good. And with these advantages, I have them winning. Honestly, I think probably they should just make these home games. This is my take, home games in this second round to give this bye week team just a little bit more of an advantage, because when it's on a neutral field, honestly, I think the lower seed has just a slightly more advantage, as we've seen. So that might fix what we've seen. But anyway, that's just my take. Let's get back to the predictions here. Oregon versus Notre Dame, 3 versus 6. This is a fascinating game. I think Notre Dame is a really freaking good team. Beating Washington the previous week at home. That'll be a tough game, but Oregon's just even tougher. This Oregon team is so talented top to bottom. I think they're more talented than Notre Dame, and unfortunately, Notre Dame, I think, drops that one and will not make it back to the semifinals. BYU versus Texas Tech. I think this is going to be one of the, I think this game, Texas, all these games are really good, but this is going to be one of the closer games in my opinion. Big 12 championship rematch. These two teams know each other well. Texas Tech, the Red Raiders, barely sneaking out with a win against Ole Miss on the road last week. That'll keep them a little bit depleted, honestly, though, in this game. And this is one of these situations where I think the bye week helps. I have BYU winning this one. Last year, we saw Texas Tech win against BYU 2 times in the year. This year, I think it's flip-flops, and BYU does. I'm telling you guys, do not count out this BYU team. They should be an excellent team this season. And I got the Cougars of BYU going to the Final Four. So that's kind of my hot take this year. They go to the college football semifinals to play Oregon. Texas, Ohio State. This is going to be a rematch of that game earlier on this season. It should be an excellent football game. I really freaking love Texas. This is they're going to be their toughest challenge, though, honestly, against Ohio State, who is a team they already beat earlier on in this year. Ohio State, really good football team. They can make the adjustments. I think this game comes down to the wire, but I honestly think this is Texas's year to go on a run here, and I think they end that game in a wild one and beat Ohio State. Then we got 3-seeded Oregon, 2-seeded BYU. As much as I love BYU and this run that they've came on here, I think they lose their first game of the year to Oregon. Oregon is just such an excellent team with that defense. They're just more physical than BYU. And I know BYU was able to win against a really physical team in Notre Dame, but Oregon's just taken that to another level. That game was being played down in Provo as well. This one will be on a neutral field in a bowl game. That's just too much. I think Oregon wins it. But I will be rooting for my Cougs in that one against Oregon. All right, Texas-Oregon championship. This should be such a fun game. I think these are arguably the two best teams in college football this season. In my opinion, these are the two teams that should meet each other in the championship game. I am going to actually have the Ducks of Oregon, this 3-seed. I really like this Ducks defense, and defense wins championships. I think this is the year for Oregon to finally win and get over the hump. It's been so many years that they haven't been able to do that, as well as Texas, but I think this is the year for Oregon. So, guys, that is going to be my video today. It was a long one. All of the predictions, all of the standings, all of the rankings comes down to number 3, Oregon winning it all. Congrats to the Ducks. But let me know what you guys think of my comments. Some hot takes in there, like BYU making the playoffs, teams like LSU missing it out, Indiana. Let me know what you guys think of my predictions. But anyway, guys, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.